People have long been fascinated by the massive Robert E. Lee Memorial in Richmond, Virginia. Or more specifically, what was under it? You see, it was believed that a time capsule might have been down there, housing a photograph of Abraham Lincoln in the days following his death. But what experts eventually found resulted in more questions than answers. After Divisive statue is removed, experts uncover strange collection of items stashed within. Intriguing stuff, right? Going back to the statue itself, though, you might be wondering what was so controversial about it. Why the fuss? Well, here's some context. Lee was a general for the Confederate Army during the U.S. Civil War. He, and many other figures from that side of the conflict, went on to have monuments erected around the country. Now, in the eyes of many people today, those statues carry a lot of negative connotations stemming from the past. In broader terms, they're seen as monuments to slavery, as the Confederate States battled to maintain it across the war. To say it's a sensitive topic would be putting it mildly. Anyway, there's been a push to get rid of the aforementioned statues for a while, including Lee's in Richmond. The city served as the Confederacy's capital back then, so there were actually another 5 monuments in the same area too. They were all taken down, ahead of a significant moment in September 2021. Yes, Lee's hulking statue was finally brought down during that period after heated arguments that spanned over 12 months. It wasn't the easiest of figures to move, given its sheer size it tipped the scales at roughly 2,400 pounds. But once it was gone, eyes soon turned towards the base. Like we mentioned before, there was a strong belief that a time capsule had been left under Lee's statue back in 1887. That was some 3 years before the figure was put on display. The rumors stemmed from old newspaper clippings, which also reeled off what might have been housed in the container. So, with the statue now out of the way, experts began to search for the capsule inside the base. But that was easier said than done. You see, that structure measured around 40 feet in size. They had a lot of ground to cover. And their initial efforts proved to be fruitless, raising the question if the stories were even true. Yet everything changed in December 2021. At that stage, a box was discovered inside a massive piece of granite, which weighed around 1,500 pounds. The excitement had to have been palpable when the experts finally caught sight of the slab. After all, they were looking at a unique bit of history. Why was this particular time capsule so coveted, though? What made it stand out compared to others? Well, to answer that, we need to go back to the late 1880s. While Lee's statue was being put together, discussions soon turned to leaving a container in the base. It wasn't a last-minute decision. A worker was then tasked to make a copper container which could comfortably sit in the statue's cornerstone. From there, a decision had to be made regarding the contents. What kind of stuff would be suitable for a time capsule? A man named William B. Isaacs shared some suggestions on that front. Isaacs, who was part of the Masons organization in Virginia, stated that unique items from the Civil War should be included. He also pushed for pieces with strong ties to Richmond to join the lineup as well. The city went on to heed his words, as locals offered up various articles to the capsule. Items such as Confederate buttons, historical text, and local maps were just some of the things put forward. Overall, 60 artifacts made their way inside the capsule before it got sealed. Talk about jam-packed. But one piece in particular really stood out from the rest. And it's not hard to understand why. In an edition of the Richmond Dispatch newspaper from October 1887, it was reported that a woman named Patty Callisleek offered a picture to the capsule. Apparently, it was shot of Abraham Lincoln's body resting inside his casket. No joke. That's a pretty weird thing to put forward, right? Here's where it gets intriguing, though. Historical records state that no more than one genuine photo of the president's dead body actually exists. Yet even that was meant to be torn up, as Abe's grieving wife Mary Todd Lincoln didn't want anyone to see it. A reasonable request, wouldn't you agree? The picture was taken when Lincoln's body arrived in New York in April 1865, even though snappers were barred from the area. The resulting shot was ordered to be discarded, with Edwin Stanton being given the responsibility. Yet the U.S. Secretary of War couldn't do it. Instead, he packed it away with some paperwork. After that, the snap then went on a remarkable journey before arriving at the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library and Museum in Illinois. It was inadvertently sent there in 1940, and no one even realized it for another 12 years. That's crazy. Life really can be stranger than fiction at times. So that prompts the question. If the only genuine shot of Lincoln's body is there, what picture did leak provide to the time capsule? Could it actually be a second photo? An expert named James Cornelius had his doubts, speculating that it might have been a sketch from someone who visited the president's memorial. Mind you, if the snap in the time capsule is the real deal, it could be worth an absolute fortune. To go into more detail on that front, Cliff Cranick spoke to Richmond magazine in December 2017. He specializes in the subject of historic photography and does some appraising too. Cranick said, assuming that the image is an original 1865 photographic print, a fair market value would be in the $250,000 to $300,000 range. That's based on its absolute rarity and its comparability to the previously most expensive photograph of President Lincoln to sell at auction for $206,500 in 2009. Wow. And going back to Cornelius's previous doubts, he and his colleagues still had an air of curiosity about the picture. He told Richmond magazine, should by some miracle, fortuitous or not, the cornerstone be opened and the image be revealed, we would love to know what it shows. It's safe to say they weren't the only ones. So now that we've got a better idea of the time capsule's significance, let's return to that fateful spell in December 2021. The box was finally within reach after more than a century under Lee's monument. But there was just one problem. Getting it out of the granite would prove to be a very tricky job. With that in mind, the historical specialists working on this took a few days to map out a viable plan. Understandably, they didn't want to rush anything and make a mistake. In the end, the group called upon tools such as wedges and electrical saws to cut pieces of the slab away. We can only imagine how tense it must have been at that stage. After all, one wrong move could spell disaster. Talk about a lot of pressure. Then, after freeing it from its granite confines, it took roughly 5 hours before the time capsule was prized open. That's some effort, right? But what happened next? Well, the process was being watched over by Ralph Northam, the governor of Virginia at the time. He was immensely curious about the entire thing, going so far as to keep people informed via social media while the work continued. Once the capsule was loosened, Northam then had the honor of opening it up. This was it, folks. The moment everyone had been waiting for. No pressure, remarked Kate Ridgway, who was part of the conservation team. Northam carefully took the top off, hoping to find the Lincoln picture staring right back at him. Yet something soon became quite clear to the people in attendance. Simply put, there was no Lincoln photograph. And on top of that, the box didn't contain the 60 objects either. You see, in a rather incredible twist, this wasn't the time capsule that experts thought that it was. This was actually a different one. Holy smokes. We wouldn't know whether to laugh or cry. So what was sitting in this time capsule then? It was a pretty odd mix, in all honesty. There was an almanac dating back to 1875, a coin from Great Britain, a book and catalog, and 2 more articles related to a guy named James Netherwood. He helped construct the base of Lee's statue. The 2 objects in question were a handwritten note and a photo. Oh, and there was a cloth envelope packed away as well. Like we said, a strange mix. One of the experts was equally baffled by what they were seeing, sharing their thoughts with the New York Times in December 2021. Her name is Julie Langan, and she runs the Virginia Department of Historic Resources. She told the newspaper, "We have not yet made sense of why this assortment was placed in the box. It's an odd assortment. Plus, the contents weren't in the best condition either, as we're about to discover." Yes, due to the conditions in the time capsule's interior, everything was soaked when the lid came off. But there was no need to panic at that point. As Ridgway informed WTVR-TV, given that the artifacts are wet, they will be put in the freezer to prevent any further deterioration. That's a relief, at least the hours of work didn't end with the artifacts falling apart. Speaking of which, Langan found it tough to get over just how much interest there was in this particular job. You see, in addition to the state governor, a few more higher-ups had their eyes on the action too. Langan told the New York Times, "It was really surprising. It kind of felt like having company at my house, all these people had descended. It was fun." For as enjoyable as she might have found it, though, the Virginia Department of Historic Resources chief recognized why others would feel bummed by what they had uncovered. The question remains, well, what happened to the Lincoln time capsule? Langan continued. "I think some people are maybe a little disappointed, but it seems that most people are very engaged and intrigued by this time capsule and wondering, what does it mean? What does it signify? It's a puzzle." Sticking with that particular analogy, one man believed that he'd put the pieces together. Yet, Dale Brumfield was of the opinion that Netherwood and another person were responsible for creating this time capsule in the 1880s. The history specialist went into more detail while chatting to ABC News in December 2021. Brumfield told the network, "It's just an ego trip for the builders of the Lee Monument. I believe that those guys were left out of the original time capsule, and they decided that they wanted to commemorate themselves by putting this small box up at the halfway point in the construction. Yes, the granite slab was taken from the 20-foot mark of the base, as opposed to the bottom." Brumfield continued, "The guys basically stopped construction, maybe had a little private ceremony, put this little box in, covered it up, and then continued construction with no media coverage at all. It was just their own little secret. An intriguing theory, wouldn't you agree?" As for the time capsule that everyone was hoping to uncover in Richmond, some of the experts have different views on what might have happened to it. For instance, Langan speculated that the box could have been taken from the base long ago, leaving no evidence behind. Langan also wondered if someone could have looted the capsule, while throwing out another theory. Maybe it wasn't buried in the base to begin with? Brumfield didn't really agree with those thoughts. As he told ABC News, "I think it will be recovered as the workers remove the foundation of the statue. Then we'll finally get a chance to see what in the devil that picture of Abraham Lincoln really is," Brumfield added. "I'm looking forward to that day coming. The historian won't be alone in that respect." Anyway, as for the future of that spot in Richmond, Northam released a statement in September 2021. Northam said, "The past 18 months have seen historic change, from the pandemic to protests for racial justice. It's fitting that we replace the old time capsule with a new one that tells that story." Yet, nearly 40 people were asked to donate objects to this updated box, with stuff such as vaccination cards and face coverings making the cut. Not quite as dramatic as a photo of a dead president, but still. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.